Now, in chapter 14, he is regulating spiritual gifts. There are other things that went on in church meetings. For example, Acts 2:42, they were devoted to prayer. That's a good thing to do in a church meeting. 1 Timothy 4:13, Paul says, be devoted to the public reading of Scripture. That's a good thing to do in a church meeting. Acts chapter 14 tells us that the mission team returned, and when they got to Antioch, they gathered the church together, and they reported all that God had done through them. Missionary reports. That's another good thing to do in a church meeting. What I want you to see is this principle of participation. And what's the point? Well, the point is to ask, how does this compare to your church meetings? You should be thinking that. Because what's the alternative? The alternative, too often, is that everything is predestined in advance. It is typed up in a bulletin. There's no question about what's going to happen. And like in this sample here, the only one who speaks, it looks like, is going to be Pastor Kelly. Well, that doesn't seem to be in keeping with a principle of participation. Now, if you go to a military cemetery, you will see perfect order. And what pastors fear in a church meeting like this is that there will be disorder. They want order. That's why they want a bulletin. I understand that. Well, the problem with the cemetery example is, even though there's perfect order, there's no life. It's better to risk a little disorder and have life than to have perfect order and no life. And so for centuries, we have conditioned God's people to be pew potatoes. They sit there, you sit down, you shut up, you be quiet. You don't say anything. They're not used to speaking. And so it's hard to get them to speak. Often when they do, they need to be coached as to what is edifying and what is not. Well, Gordon Fee rightly pointed out, he said the history of the church points to the fact that in worship, we do not greatly trust the diversity of the body. Edification must always be the rule, and that carries with it orderliness. But it is no great credit to the historical church that in opting for order, it also opted for a silencing of the ministry of the many.